rival over the years. They had previously sought assistance from other communities. Later, Ezekiel proposed the idea of establishing a market to facilitate the exchange of essential resources. The first market was scheduled to take place in 2 days' time. On the other side, at Alexandria's safe zone, Michonne returned from the hilltop and promptly convened a committee meeting. She was furious that some of the committee members had done things without her knowledge. Particularly, she was upset with Gabriel for allowing Eugene and Rosita to venture out to install an amplifier, which ultimately led to Jesus' death. Negan also seized the opportunity to escape during this incident. Gabriel countered, "In the beginning, you were appointed sheriff to keep the community safe, so you were given veto power." However, he argued, now she seemed to oppose every decision they made, be it going outside, interacting with strangers, or assisting the kingdom. He questioned the purpose of committee voting, asking who would help them when they faced trouble. Sid sided with Gabriel, also voicing his support. He recounted their encounter with Carol at the hilltop, revealing that the kingdom's situation was even worse than what was mentioned in the letter. This was the reason for their desperate plea for help. With 2 days until the market, he suggested they could re-evaluate their decision to participate. But, not surprisingly, Michonne was again against it, and her reasoning was simple. The kingdom can come to the door and ask for help, but they can't go out to the fair. Plus, there were the Whisperers out there, which meant danger. Consequently, the committee meeting ended with Michonne's decisive veto. Back at home, Gabriel seethed with frustration, feeling his role as committee head was virtually meaningless. He saw Michonne as overly autocratic and stubborn. In the midst of Gabriel's discontent, Rosita, his girlfriend, entered the living room. Rosita came here to say goodbye to Gabriel, because Rosita is pregnant and the baby is still Siddick's. She didn't want to make things difficult for Gabriel, so she chose to move out on her own accord. Gabriel didn't attempt to dissuade her. He was at a loss for what to do next. Of course, there is another participant in the relationship, Eugene. He doesn't mind that Rosita is carrying another man's child. However, unfortunately for Eugene, Rosita's affection lies with Gabriel. So, Eugene sought out Gabriel, encouraging him not to give up just because of the child. He reminded Gabriel that it's rare to find such a wonderful girl. Following his words, Eugene handed Gabriel a bundle he had brought with him, a handmade loose-fitting maternity outfit. Although Rosita had no feelings for Eugene, he wanted the woman he loved to be happy. He hoped that Gabriel would use the outfit as a gift to win Rosita back. Gabriel contemplated Eugene's words for a while, eventually coming to the realization that Eugene was right. With that, Eugene turned and left. He shouldn't miss out on such a great girl just because of a child that wasn't his. So, he headed to Rosita's door. Meanwhile, Siddick was sitting by the door. This part of the Walking Dead series might seem melodramatic, but from the storyline, it can be deduced that Rosita and Siddick didn't have a strong emotional connection. Maybe they were just looking for excitement together and accidentally had a baby. In the back, Rosita and Gabriel love each other. Even more melodramatic, Gabriel and Siddick don't hold any grudges against each other. They remain good brothers in arms. Gabriel decided to talk to them about winning back his lover. Eugene watched from a distance as Gabriel approached Rosita's door, a smile on his face. But slowly, Eugene's eyes were filled with a little bit of reluctance and sadness. On the other hand, Michonne came to the dungeon to ask Negan how he ran away. She wanted to know why he returned after escaping and what his intentions were. Negan slowly rose and stood by the cell door, saying, "I did escape before. I could have hidden in your house and killed you when you returned. Even taken out a lot of folks in the community, but I didn't." Before Negan could finish, Michonne interjected, "Because you know if you laid a hand on me, you'd be dead." She continued, "As for why you came back after escaping, I think it's because you realized you can't handle the world out there. So, you slinked back here." Negan didn't bother to argue. He admitted that the world had indeed changed a lot since he last left, but he had changed too. Since Michonne wouldn't kill him, could she get him to do something meaningful? Could she try to believe him? However, Negan's intentions are met with sarcasm by Michonne. To Michonne, it's crocodile tears. She didn't believe Negan and planned to reinforce the cell and seal the window even further. An hour later, Judith returned home. Michonne immediately inquired why she had followed her. Judith said, "I didn't follow you. I went to see Negan." Michonne's brow immediately furrowed. It was hard to believe that this little ancestor and Negan had crossed paths. This was unacceptable to her.
Why?
I feel sorry for him.
He is not your friend, sweetheart.
Obviously. Listens to me. Not everybody does. No, he's not.
There's a reason he's in a cage, Judith.
He's a human being.
But he has done monstrous things. He's killed people I cared about. And the people I cared about. And if we ever let him talk, again.
Mom, please get out. He's not like that.
I get why you want to believe that.
Believe it.
Believe it. I need a minute.
This single sentence set Michonne into contemplation. She had indeed changed. No longer the child's best friend, but rather a perceived dictator in the eyes of others. After thinking things through at home, Michonne sought out Aaron. She asked him to convey to the committee that she wouldn't oppose voting to participate in the kingdom's market. Although she believed going out so far was dangerous, everyone had their own opinions and should be allowed to weigh the risks and make choices. That's the right of every resident. With Michonne no longer in opposition, the committee immediately began loading supplies into vehicles, preparing to embark on the journey to the market. Many viewers might wonder why they were participating in the market. It's essentially the principle of alleviating poverty. Alexandria's safe zone was self-sufficient, but the kingdom might not make it without help from other communities. This was in line with the vision of the United Society established by Rick. Over in the kingdom, preparations were also in full swing. Not only did they decorate the community beautifully, but Ezekiel also sent a team to clear the road of zombies, ensuring the safety of the incoming caravan. It all seems to be going well, and Carol is smiling happily. The fair would be a great addition to the new civilization. However, at this moment, Carol noticed the return of Jerry and others who had been cleaning up zombies outside. She was surprised by their early return. Carol saw that Jerry had a wound on his forehead, and the others seemed visibly shaken. They stated their intention to speak with the king. Carol could tell that something had gone wrong. They gathered in the hall and recounted their encounter outside. Originally, they were going about their usual business of clearing out zombies when they were unexpectedly attacked by a team. Thankfully, they weren't killed, but their weapons were taken, leaving behind a note that read, "We are the highwaymen." The note went on to declare that the roads around the kingdom belonged to them, and anyone coming to the market had to pay a toll. The note included a list of items and a designated trading location. Now, things were complicated. How could the kingdom, which had organized the fair because of a lack of food, possibly curry favor with the highwaymen? Jerry suggested that they eliminate these individuals, as their presence posed a threat to the communities attending the market. They needed to ensure the safety of their allies. Ezekiel thought it made sense and was ready to gather his men to do it. An hour later, they quietly approached the outskirts of the designated trading location. Observing the heavily armed highwaymen, Ezekiel realized that an all-out confrontation would result in heavy casualties on both sides. If they don't, no one will ever come to the fair again. Just when Ezekiel didn't know what to do, Carol came up with an idea. She believed that violence might not be the only solution. After all, the highwaymen didn't kill anyone before. They just wanted the supplies. Soon after, Ezekiel, Carol, and Jerry arrived at the designated trading location. Seeing that they hadn't brought anything with them, the leader of the highwaymen grew displeased. He ordered his followers to raise their weapons, ready for action at any moment. Ezekiel, however, stood his ground. He expressed that they wouldn't yield to their extortion, just when the highwaymen thought they had the upper hand. The ambush team from the kingdom charged in. They held knives to the throats of the highwaymen, and archers took aim from higher ground. Ezekiel also took out his long knife. "As if you were going to make trouble. I would have to kill you." Then the men calmed down. Carol seized the opportunity to suggest that they work for them instead. Their mission is to secure the roads to the kingdom, not to rob it. In return, they would be allowed to participate in the market and exchange goods, as well as receive food and water from the kingdom. Ultimately, the highwaymen agreed, and the potential conflict was resolved peacefully. The survivors' team armed with weapons continued forward on the road as they encountered zombies. These members of Hilltop Township They're on their way to the market. After living in the post-apocalyptic world for so long, everyone has mastered combat skills and is able to destroy zombies with ease. Even the gentle girl with glasses can kill the zombies without any hesitation. Earl had just let his horse go when some zombies came towards him. As soon as Earl kills one, he trips over another. He managed to take down one, but another zombie knocked him to the ground. Tammy, on the horse-drawn cart, panicked. She quickly placed her child into a box, covered it, and prepared to rescue Earl. They could have stayed at the hilltop, but they were getting older and they intended to go to the market to find better guardians for their young children. Pressured by the weight of zombies, Earl struggled to hold on. When he looked up, he noticed a group of people rushing towards him with weapons in hand. These people seemed aggressive and unfamiliar. Tara's group noticed this too and swiftly got into a defensive stance. In the post-apocalyptic world, some humans could be more ruthless than zombies. The newcomers, riding horses and armed, showed no signs of stopping. They were ready for action. That's right, they are the highwaymen. They had already agreed to work for the kingdom, ensuring the safety of the road. An hour later, under the highwaymen's protection, the hilltop arrived at the kingdom. The sight of the bustling market attracted the young people who had come along. They were always drawn to fresh experiences. Carol and Ezekiel personally stepped forward to welcome them. Tara, who hadn't seen them in a while, hugged them. After a brief exchange, Carol turned her gaze towards the entrance but didn't spot Henry. She asked where the kid was. Tara told them to take it easy. Henry was with Daryl and they had agreed to meet at the market. Speaking of Daryl's group, after getting Henry out, they continued moving in the direction of the kingdom. However, they stopped in front of a large building. Daryl decided not to run anymore and planned to use the terrain to handle the pursuing whisperers. According to Lydia, Alpha probably wouldn't send a large group of her people. Only the strongest, Beta, would come. The whisperers often used zombies as cover, and this tall building could separate humans from the zombies. Daryl and Connie got to work setting up while Henry and Lydia kept watch outside. After about half an hour, there was movement below. A small group of zombies arrived, mixed with a few whisperers. Lydia's guess was right. Not many whisperers were mingling with the horde. Beta was leading them. Daryl stands on the balcony and raises his crossbow, piercing the head of one of the zombies below. His aim was to attract attention. Beta kept his cool, watching the fallen zombies, then raised his eyes and looked around just in time to see Daryl. 10 minutes later, Beta pushed open the door with the zombies in tow. Dozens of zombies swarmed in, and they quickly made their way to the stairway. Only it was blocked by countless things. Beta had already guessed that this was a trap surely to stop the zombies at the bottom, but Beta didn't care, as the strongest of the whisperers. So what if it's a trap? Upstairs, Daryl instructed Lydia to hide in a room. This served two purposes: to prevent her from becoming a liability and to safeguard against her. After all, they were about to kill Lydia's compatriots, in case she regretted this plan. Henry was ready, positioned at the door. Suddenly, the doorknob turned, and two whisperers entered. Since all the windows on this floor were sealed shut, it was pitch black without any light. The two intruders cautiously separated to search. Henry hid behind the cupboard and knocked me out in a couple of strokes. He had promised Lydia that he wouldn't kill unless absolutely necessary. The other whisperer heard the commotion and rushed over, raising the bow and arrow in their hands, but Connie is already behind him. Meanwhile, Daryl was hidden behind another door, ready to shoot his arrow as soon as someone opened it. Beta was prepared for this and blocked it with a door, then rushed in. Daryl's attack missed its mark, prompting him to swiftly retreat. Inside the room, Lydia hears the screams and worries about Henry. Lydia wants to go out and help, so she tries to pry the door open with a crowbar in his hand. Henry is at a disadvantage here too. The Whisperer picked up a spear and stabbed him. Although Henry was able to block it, the Whisperer stabbed him in the thigh. At the last moment, Dog lunged at the Whisperer, knocking him to the ground. Henry also seized the opportunity to kill him with a single blow of his stick. Connie swiftly ended the fight and rushed over to check on Henry's thigh wound. Working to stop the bleeding, Daryl used his familiarity with the surroundings to silently eliminate the Whisperers one by one. With the small fry out of the way, it was time to face Beta. Just then there was a rush of footsteps. Beta crashed through the boards, grabbed Daryl and slammed him against the wall. Beta's imposing size and strength were truly formidable. Daryl realized that going head-to-head wasn't an option and quickly distanced himself, grabbing a piece of wood from the floor as a makeshift weapon. This time, Daryl was at a complete disadvantage in the fight between the two. This Beta truly works up to being the strongest member of the Whisperers. Beta relentlessly pursued Daryl, who managed to dodge an attack and stab Beta with a knife. Surprisingly, it had little effect. Beta retaliated, flinging Daryl aside. Beta continues to chase him in, but the man is nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, Beta hears movement behind the curtain, just as his attention is focused this way. Behind Beta, a board slowly opens up. Daryl was originally hiding here. When Beta began to sense that something was amiss, suddenly, Beta fell down a lift shaft. Daryl, showing his disdain, spat on the ground and then turned away. But, not long after they left, logically speaking, Beta, who had fallen 3 floors down, should have died. This guy's physical resilience was astonishingly strong. As he managed to stand up once again, Beta's eyes were filled with hatred. Daryl and his group, who had left, didn't continue towards the kingdom but instead made their way to the nearest Alexandria safe zone. It does feel a little bleak. Daryl was once a key pillar here, but now, his return feels like he's a guest. I don't know when Daryl started acting like a guest and he came back to his house. This season, Michonne was so cold and unfeeling that millions of viewers began to hate the former goddess of war. Eventually, for old time's sake, the 4 Daryls were allowed into the Alexandria safe zone. Henry's wound was tended to in the infirmary. Michonne remained cautious though, deeming Lydia a potential threat. Staying here for any longer might jeopardize the safety of Alexandria's safe zone. Daryl says that once Henry's wounds are taken care of, they'll head to the kingdom. Despite Michonne's frosty demeanor, Connie approached and thanked her. Without Michonne, their integration into the hilltop wouldn't have been possible. After a while, Henry's wound was treated. Luckily, no bones were harmed, and a few stitches sufficed. Daryl came to the lake and sat with Judith. This is a very cozy picture. How many of you remember Judith's first milk was fed by Daryl? This tough guy isn't great at expressing his emotions, but if the day came when Rick's child was in danger, Daryl might even lay down his life to save them. Although Judith is young and hasn't spent much time with Uncle Daryl, she already considers him family. Judith, smart and kind-hearted, has a hunch that Henry's gotten into some trouble, and Uncle Daryl is aiding them. Judith wants to help, but her mom is too strong to let her. Yet, Daryl tells Judith, "Your mom is right. Ensuring this place survives allows you and your brother to live carefree lives. That's what matters most." However, Judith doesn't agree. She'd heard Negan talk about everyone banding together to fight the Saviors, and about her brother's bravery and kindness. So, Judith believes that, whatever the trouble, unity will prevail once again. Daryl doesn't respond, just sits there in silence. At night, the group prepares to leave. They're heading to the kingdom, and they don't want to burden Alexandria's safe zone. Daryl doesn't complain about Michonne. Daryl had been a witness to Jocelyn's incident, so he understood why Michonne was so cautious. And so, the 4 of them set out once more, hoping this journey will be smoother without further obstacles. Judith watched them leave and was really angry with her mom. During the family meal, Judith was also listless and kept poking at her plate. Late into the night, Michonne tossed and turned, unable to find sleep. She knew Judith was upset with her. Unable to sleep, Michonne went to the door of her room, knocked gently and said, "Judith, I know you're angry. Can we talk about it? There's something I want to tell you." Michonne's intention was to discuss the Jocelyn incident from the past, though Judith was there at the time. She's likely forgotten about it by now. However, when Michonne opened the door, the room was empty. Michonne searched for Judith throughout the night, but couldn't find her until dawn. Finally, she went to the cell to ask Negan if he'd seen Judith. Negan claimed he hadn't seen her since yesterday. Michonne, getting angry, she thought that Judith must be like this because of something Negan had said to her. Sarcastically, Negan remarked, "Now you care? I just talked about old times with her." He mentioned Rick's fortitude and Carl's bravery and kindness. Michonne didn't believe any of it.
She hates that you're not letting new people in.
No, you don't get to talk to me about Carl, and you definitely don't get to tell me what she wants or feels. She is my daughter.
That is exactly right. She is your daughter, so she has her own ideas about how things should be. Calm down. You came down here because you have no idea where she is. Maybe she's petting a horse. Or maybe she is exactly like her mother and she is not taking shit lying down.
That very statement triggered something in Michonne's mind. She hurriedly left and returned home, bursting into Judith's room. Opening the box with the revolver, Michonne found only a note. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I have to go after them. Friends need help. Your daughter, Judith. Filled with anxiety, Michonne mounted her horse and rode in the direction of the kingdom, desperately trying to catch up. Soon, she spotted Judith's small bicycle parked at the roadside, and there was a horde of zombies in front of her. Michonne was killing zombies as she walked. At this moment, Michonne is going crazy and she prays that nothing happens to Judith. It was a blessing in disguise, but Judith was fine. Michonne hugged her daughter tightly. The feeling of holding her in her arms was real. Judith was a little afraid to face Michonne after her mistake. Michonne didn't chastise her. She decided to find a place to talk about the Jocelyn incident so Judith could understand why she was doing what she was doing.
I was standing right there. And it was like you didn't know. For a second, I thought I was too late. I thought that you changed and that I'd lost you.
The scene Michonne referred to may or may not be familiar to everyone. Back then, in order to save Judith, she had to take the lives of several children. In that moment, the look Judith gave her was filled with unfamiliarity.
You didn't look like you. Because of the blood. And that's all it was. And it's after you found me.
You remember that? What else?
Jocelyn, her kids, they were nice to us the whole time. I remember they made it all seem like a game, so we went with them. But she was a bad person. They all were. It's why you did what you did.
This was completely unexpected for Michonne. She believed that Judith, being so young, wouldn't remember, so she never brought it up again. It was this incident that turned Michonne into the cold and ruthless person she became. From a mother's perspective, she simply couldn't bear the feeling of helplessness and losing child. Upon returning to the Alexandria safe zone, they stood before Carl's grave. Michonne recounted the events that followed the Jocelyn incident. At that time, most of the people in the community had decided to be responsible only for the people in their own community, so she too became apathetic. Though it wasn't the society Rick and Carl aspired to build, at the very least, it ensured the lasting stability of Alexandria's safe zone and protected the children from harm. Judith's actions today and her words had begun to change Michonne's icy demeanor. Michonne realized that she was right to keep her children safe, but she couldn't limit what they could become. They really should protect and help those who are not blood but are no family. So, mother and daughter mounted the carriage and set off toward the kingdom. The journey ahead was long, but their purpose was clear: to help their friends. At that moment, two zombies appeared in the woods outside the kingdom. A closer look reveals that they are all human disguises. Naturally, these were the Whisperer's spies. Scattered throughout the area, coincidentally, they caught sight of the carriage entering the community. There was undoubtedly some event or gathering taking place here. Inside the kingdom, several communities of survivors gathered together. Ezekiel was delivering the opening speech for the inaugural market. In his speech, he mentions Rick and Jesus as two people who deserve to be remembered by everyone in the development of civilization in this region. Without them, everyone would still be living under the rule of the Saviors. Without them, the major communities wouldn't be experiencing the peace they had today. Without them, the communities would not be as peaceful as they are today. Life had to go on. The market was also set to become a bridge for further cultural development in the region. After the opening ceremony, Ezekiel suddenly noticed Carol, Luke, and a few others getting ready in the distance. Since the market had already begun, and Henry and the others hadn't returned, they were preparing to go out and search. Ezekiel exchanged a few words with the gathering before coming to bid farewell to his wife. As a father, he should have gone to Henry as well, but the market can't go unsupervised. Before the couple could exchange more words, Kelly was urging them to hurry up. He was very concerned about her sister. As they were about to leave, the gate swung open, and to their sight appeared the dog in six figures. Seeing them, all four of Luke's group broke into smiles. Carol and Ezekiel, of course, spotted their son and Michonne. Henry limped towards his mom with his own stick and an air of manliness about him.
Can't ever run away again. Not ever again.
Although he had only been away for 2 weeks, Henry had obviously matured a lot. With teary eyes, Carol embraced her son. After the hug, Carol noticed another loved one, Daryl. The two of them had the best chance to be a couple, but it was a miss. But their kinship is still there.
Sure. It's in the neighborhood, so.
You remember us?
Your turn. Your hair got really long.
It did.
Tara then approached, but her smile froze as she laid eyes on Lydia. She questioned Daryl, asking if the plan wasn't just to bring back Henry. Why was Lydia here too? A silence fell over the scene. Only Michonne spoke with seriousness. Let's gather the leaders here. We have something important to discuss. In a short while, the leaders from the four communities convened in the meeting room. Before getting down to business, Michonne apologized and said, I know I'd had some disagreements with some of you in this room, but I care about each one of you. During that time, my focus was solely on protecting my family, doing what was right for my people. But I've come to my senses. The future of the Alexandria safe zone is not about remaining stagnant, but about moving forward together with everyone. I'm sorry for not recognizing this earlier, but I'm here now. Carol and Ezekiel nodded their heads. They were all family and had no axe to grind. Following this, Gabriel stepped forward to speak, saying, Our Alexandria Safe Zone Committee has voted internally and decided to offer Lydia asylum. She's now one of us. We hope you can join us in this decision. Tara raised a concern. If Alpha seeks retaliation, she'd likely target the hilltop, not Alexandria's safe zone. I need to do what's right for my people.
And look, when she came to my gates, I asked her to run away. And when she didn't, I was angry.
Then you know I'm not okay with this.
I do. I also know why Rick didn't trust me when I showed up at the gates of the prison. And how people really trust you after seeing you on the other side of the weapons firing line.
I was going to pull on tight when you washed up on our shore.
To this, Tara found herself momentarily speechless. In the end, the four major communities collectively decided to shelter Lydia. Simultaneously, each community would send personnel to the hilltop to guard against any retaliation from the Whisperers, and they're planning to leave today. From this point on, the four major communities once again formed a united front. Ezekiel even brought out a charter, which had previously been drawn up by Rick. It was akin to a joint community contract, though it was signed 5 years later than intended, just as they were signing the charter within the hilltop. For individuals prepared to set out, they also wanted to join the festivities of the market. A married couple drove the carriage. It was their wedding anniversary, and they wished to find something special. They were about to reach the kingdom when they were attacked. The carriage overturned, and the four individuals were brutally murdered by the Whisperers. Alpha took a liking to the woman's beautiful golden hair and proceeded to cut off her scalp. Within the kingdom, the four major communities signed the charter. Lydia and Henry felt a weight lifted and began exploring the market. Undoubtedly, it was a grand event. Some people put up their own stuff in exchange. Some sought out blacksmiths to forge weapons. Luke and Alden took the stage, showcasing their talents. Eugene demonstrated the wonders of science to children. It's a sight that would be hard to believe in a post-apocalyptic world. Of course, some couldn't participate in the upcoming market. These were the individuals selected in the meeting, preparing to head to the hilltop to prevent the Whisperers' attack. As they ventured a bit further, they came across an overturned carriage ahead. From the items scattered around, it appeared to be from the hilltop. Bloodstains marked the ground, but no bodies were visible. It was highly likely that the Whisperers had struck. Daryl examined the traces on the ground. It seemed the individuals were dragged away from this direction. The current dilemma was whether the abducted individuals were still alive. Pursuing them might yield a chance for rescue, but it was also possible that the sadistic foes were seeking revenge against the hilltop. In the end, Michonne came up with a compromise. The four of them were trapped, while the rest continued on the road. Within the kingdom's market, a blonde beauty in a green dress appeared. Curiously, she took in her surroundings. This woman was none other than Alpha, who had infiltrated the market. Her attire, including the golden hair, was all from the woman she had killed. As Alpha examined the scene before her, the Earl couple walked past her with their child. Alpha hurriedly pulled down the brim of her hat to avoid being recognized by the two. After they left, Alpha continued to hang out. Ahead, The sight of 4 banners on the wall captured her attention. This made Alpha realize that the region was home to 4 communities. As she scrutinized the scene, Ezekiel approached her and greeted her. Ezekiel found her somewhat unfamiliar, having never seen her before. Thankfully, Alpha improvised, claiming she had recently joined Alexandria's safe zone, so not recognizing her was normal. Ezekiel didn't suspect anything and warmly introduced her to the market. That night, the kingdom's grand event began. They had managed to acquire a movie projection setup. People from all 4 neighborhoods were waiting in their seats, especially the children, who had never seen such a novelty since they were born. Watching a movie in the apocalypse was something people hadn't dared to dream of. It became a unique feature of the kingdom. Lydia also sat in her seat and waited for Henry. 10 minutes passed, and still, Henry hadn't appeared. Lydia didn't think much of it. Lydia didn't believe anything would happen to Henry within the kingdom, but at that moment, a figure sat next to Lydia. Lydia was so engrossed in what she was watching that she didn't notice, until the figure put a hand on her hand. Lydia turned around and breathed heavily, but she could only pretend to be calm. Later, the mother and daughter stepped outside. Alpha was furious, seeing her daughter immersed in this false happiness. Alpha felt Lydia had betrayed the Whisperer's beliefs. Thus, Alpha demanded that Lydia come back with her immediately. Lydia, with a resolute expression, told her mother that the people here were kind. They care about each other, and they're even willing to fight you to protect me. Leave now. Stay away from my life. I don't want them to kill you either. Despite her evil, Alpha did indeed love her daughter, though her mindset had twisted in the apocalypse, altering the way she expressed it. Knowing that his daughter had made up her mind, Alpha turned around and left the kingdom, heartbroken. In the forest, Daryl and the others continued their search and tracking efforts. Following the trail of blood on the ground, they had ventured quite a distance. However, the blood trail suddenly diverged into 3 directions here, which made no sense at all. Daryl realizes something is wrong and decides to go back in case it's a trap. Just as they were turning around, 2 zombies emerged from the nearby woods. These were clearly the 2 individuals who had gone missing from the hilltop. Yumiko and Daryl quickly took care of them with arrows. After dealing with the zombies, they heard movement in the nearby woods again. Michonne cautioned everyone to be vigilant and watch their hands closely, just in case there were whisperers among them. After killing a few zombies, even more started approaching them. It was evident that they were in a trap. Daryl urged them to quickly return to the main road, but when they turned around, there was a large group of zombies coming the same way they came. This was getting eerie. Zombies blocked every direction. They had no choice but to draw their weapons and eliminate them all. 10 minutes later, the ground was littered with zombie corpses. But then, Yumiko froze. A whisperer emerged, wearing the skin of a member from the hilltop. It was downright chilling. It's not over. More and more whisperers appeared from all around and surrounded them once again, all of them with knives in their hands. Faced with the numerous whisperers, fighting back seemed like a dead end. Daryl had no option but to drop his weapon, and so, the 4 of them became captives. Alpha gradually approached them. However, to everyone's surprise, Alpha spoke. "You think it's because of my daughter? This is our new camp. 4 fools stumbled into us during the day. We had to kill them." And Michonne, not to be outdone, said, "Our 4 communities have sheltered Lydia. If you want to forcefully take her back, be prepared for our joint retaliation." Alpha, instead of being afraid, pulled out his pistol and said,
Your group is in no position to threaten me. That is a habit that needs to be broken. Come with me. Just you.
Daryl followed Alpha without fear. He wanted to see what this woman was up to. Soon, dawn began to break. The 2 of them arrived at a deep pit, where something seemed to be present. As Daryl continued to walk, he suddenly froze. The pit was filled with countless zombies, an overwhelming and horrifying sight. It was truly terrifying. Daryl couldn't help but inwardly marvel. Was this the source of the Whisperer's confidence?
The only reason you and your friends are alive is because I let you live.
What do you want?
Nothing.
Alpha answered his question. "You don't have what I want. I've observed your way of life and walked your streets. It's a joke. Really. Our whisperers follow the laws of nature, and we will survive." Daryl couldn't help but scorn her words. Thinking that these were just nonsense theories she used to manipulate her followers, Alpha continued, They follow me because I am Alpha. As a leader, it is vital to maintain prestige. That's why I've done those things. Alpha's tone had a hint of compassion in her voice as she spoke. Daryl had a sinking feeling. Could it be that this woman had already attacked their communities? Without disclosing her actions, Alpha turned to Daryl, issuing a veiled threat. Your friends at the camp are safe, but tell them that if they trespass on my territory again, don't blame me for leading a horde of zombies to pay them a visit. Listen carefully. The fractured interstate divides it. To the south is my territory, and I've marked the northern boundary for you. You'll see it when you leave. Now you can go. Your friends are waiting for you up north. Now that he could leave, Daryl didn't dawdle any longer, and soon he saw Carol at the top of the hill. Alpha hadn't harmed them, but was this woman truly as benevolent as she seemed? After their departure, Alpha stood somberly in the woods. She understood that after this incident, she and her daughter would only grow farther apart. Beta wanted to console Alpha, but his attempt was rebuffed. Alpha wanted to be alone. Coincidentally, an unlucky Whisperer witnessed this moment. With no one watching, a tear escaped her eye. Alpha noticed and looked back. Then Alpha hooked her finger. Alpha didn't want anyone to witness her vulnerability. Only a cold-hearted Alpha could lead the Whisperers. Daryl and the four of them returned the way they came. But then on the road they see Siddiq tied to a tree. What was going on? Wasn't he at the marketplace? Siddiq was obviously injured and couldn't speak for a while, just pointing weakly to the distance. As they followed his gaze, their hearts sank. A row of severed heads was lined up neatly on the hilltop. Although it is hard to see who they are, they must be members of the four communities. They walked towards the top of the mountain little by little. So this is what Alpha meant when she said she had to do something. This is also the demarcation line she was talking about. As they got closer, the faces of the heads became clearer and clearer. Even Michonne, who had been through so much, found it hard to accept. The first two heads belonged to the leader and a member of the Highwaymen. The third was DJ from Alexandria's safe zone. In fact, people had gone missing since Alpha's appearance in the marketplace yesterday. This girl, for example, couldn't find her friends when she tried. Earl's wife is also missing. The friend that this teenager from the hilltop was desperately looking for has now appeared on a stick. And Alden, who was performing on stage, also noticed that his girlfriend Enid was missing. As they reached the next head, both Michonne and Siddiq broke down. Daryl turned his gaze to the last head.
I can't find Henry.
It was Henry's. Oh God, it was suffocating. Seeing friends and loved ones murdered, their heads displayed before them, it was an overwhelming and heart-wrenching sight. The place where the stick had been stuck became the dividing line for the Whisperers and a place of sadness for all of them. Back at the kingdom, Siddiq stood on a platform, recounting the events. He had been one of the captives. The Whisperers deliberately kept him alive so that he could tell the crowd what happened and spread the fear. After their silent abduction, the two members of the Highwaymen, along with DJ, tried to rescue them. Others joined the resistance. Nobody was clinging to life. Instead, they united to protect each other. But just when everyone thought they'd escaped, Alpha came with more men, and then the tragedy unfolded. This time, no one suggested revenge, because sometimes one has to endure. In the previous episode, it was mentioned that the Whisperers killed people from the four major communities and put their heads on display along the border. Crossing this line would provoke a war, so seeking revenge was off the table as it would only lead to more deaths. 3 months later, winter arrived, and this year seemed colder than ever. The kingdom felt desolate. Despite hopes that the marketplace would alter the situation, the lack of manpower remained a pressing issue. Heating facilities were severely decayed, worsened by an accidental fire. The kingdom was no longer habitable, so they had to move. Otherwise, they would not be able to survive the winter. Folks from other communities came to aid in the safe passage to the hilltop. As they walked out the gates, the people were overcome with sadness. This was their home. After all, Ezekiel was particularly distressed. Having poured his heart into building this community, he now had to depart. Unlikely to return, the convoy moved slowly along the road. Michonne inquired about the hilltop situation. Unico said that despite the 3 months that had passed, people were still grieving. They are still without a leader. They have written to Maggie. All eyes turned towards the distance at that moment. A few zombies roamed the field. unmistakably being monitored by the Whisperers. This upset Alden so much that he started to say something sarcastic, something along the lines of, "Haven't the bloody Whisperers done enough to them?" He directed his comments while keeping an eye on Lydia. It's a good thing Daryl spoke up in time for Alden to say anything. During this time, the way people looked at Lydia was notably strange, considering the number of lives lost by her. Some even spoke ill of her. It's a good thing Daryl's been around to defend Lydia. Even Carol was no exception. Every time she saw Lydia, thoughts of her son Henry came rushing in.
Henry wanted her here. No one else did. She's a good kid.
Every time I look at her, all I see is him.
You see me with me.
It's you.
Ezekiel, who was ahead, overheard the conversation between the two and looked back, witnessing the scene. He didn't say anything, instead engaging Jerry in a weather-related discussion. It seems likely that heavy snow was on the way. It didn't take long for snow to fall. In just half an hour, they blanketed the landscape in a pristine white. At the roadside, two zombies appeared, drawn by the noise. Shuffling toward them, Daryl and Carol each took aim and dispatched them with arrows. Carol was about to go over to retrieve her arrow, but Ezekiel told her to go on ahead, that he could take care of it. Lydia saw that their attention was drawn away from the zombies and no one was paying attention to her, so she disappeared under the cover of the carriage. In fact, Ezekiel was deliberately trying to distract Carol. He confided in Daryl, "I don't want to be the bad guy, but I'm going to say it. It's been a rough time for Carol and I. We'll start over when we get to the hilltop. Yet, I hope it's just the two of us." Implicitly, he hoped Lydia wouldn't stay there, to avoid causing further heartache. There was another layer to his meaning. He wanted Daryl to leave as well. He doesn't want his wife to give her attention to someone else. Daryl gave Ezekiel a disdainful glance, then turned and rejoined the larger group. Lydia, on the other hand, heads off into the woods alone when no one's looking. She didn't know where she was going. She just wanted to separate from the group. It wasn't until she stumbled upon a small frozen pond with a zombie trapped in the ice. Lydia slowly moved forward, the ice supporting her weight. As she faced the zombie, which could only move its mouth, she crouched down, seemingly making a decision. For the past 3 months, others' gazes had been accusatory, and Lydia had been mired in self-blame and guilt. Mom killed so many good people, including Henry, who she loved, and it made it impossible for her to face them. She thought maybe ending it all was better, so she extended her hand toward the zombie's mouth, eyes closed, ready to put an end to it all. Right as the zombie was about to bite, Lydia heard footsteps behind her, and when she looks back, it's Carol. The two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Seeing Lydia in this state, Carol comprehended that the young girl was also grappling with deep self-blame. A few minutes later, Carol returned to the road with Lydia. The others were discussing their next moves. Due to the intensifying snow, even pushing through the night wouldn't get them to the hilltop. It seemed better to find a place to rest for now. A few of the older members thought of a place to rest at the same time, which was the former Salvation Hall. New member Magna couldn't believe that people had actually lived in this place before, because at this moment, the Salvation Hall is in a state of disrepair and dilapidation. In the Alexandria Security Zone, a group of people gathered in a house. This was one of the few places in the community, along with Aaron's house, with a closet. They had to come here to get warm. Gabriel brought Negan along, saving him from freezing in his cell. Negan started talking a lot more since he had so many people with him, but Judith was the first one to stop Negan when he talked dirty. All Negan could do was keep apologizing. He had a soft spot for the little guy. Judith sat by the window, watching. She was there because Uncle Daryl had asked her to look after the dog. However, the dog had disappeared with the onset of the heavy snow. Negan felt something amiss. He caught a scent in the air, while others thought he was just stirring up conversation and scolded him to quiet down. Eugene's brow furrowed.
Get away from there.
Blizzard's done some tearing and blaring, and our chimney's ventilation capabilities are nil to none. It'd be unwise to spark another blaze unless we plan on ceasing all respiratory functions, aka smoking and choking.
God, I missed you, Eugene.
Can't say the same.
Without a place to build a fire, It's going to be hard to get by on this bedding alone. Young people are fine, but there are old people and children here. So Gabriel decided to move the group to Aaron's house before it got colder. It's a little smaller, but at least there's a closet.
Seriously? Not one of you assholes is gonna untie me?